Sudanese Sufis and the reconciliation with the local traditions. We have previously discussed the reasons and factors why Sufism and Sufi orders were able to spread so successfully in the Sudan. In this episode, we will discuss and present how the earlier Sufi Turu, specifically the Qadiriya, came to reconcile with the new environment or the Sudanese setting. But before doing that, let me re-emphasize how the Sufi doctrines and of the Sudanese Turuq that already have been presented in our previous episode, how this doctrine with its unique attributes of simplicity, tolerance, moderation and flexibility came to reconcile with the traditions of the new environment. However, the process of reconciliation with the local traditions, by the way, has assisted this Torah to spread and disseminate its teaching so widely across the country. Dating back to the history of Islam in Sudan, as we have also introduced in our earlier session concerning the Islamicization of the country, we have stated that the introduction and the consolidation of Sudanese Islam has been done through Sufi orders, following its arrival of its Senate or spiritual chains of transmission through different epochs of the Sudanese history, starting more specifically from Foyle Sultanate in the year 1504-1821, passing through the Turkish rule, following with the pre-independence stage of the Sudanese people. However, through these three stages, here the Foyle Sultanate, the Turkish rule, in addition to the stage that preceded the independence of the country, here the major senate of Sufi orders have spread out the country. That process accompanied with this Turuq position to a formula that best suited the community or the local communities. However, a successful marriage between Sufi doctrine and local cultures had taken place since that far time. However, relationship between migrated Muslims and non-Muslims in Sudan started to be formed and developed. This tendency of Muslim Sufis created the circumstances of coexistence between Muslims and non-Muslims. However, this peaceful coexistence between the migrated elements with their own traditions and customs with the local traditions and custom of the populace, from that time on, I started, by the way, to have started to brand it Sudanese Islam started to stand at the mark to nature of the Sudanese Islam, as I have stated, in a way that the Sudanese, and through different times, came to coexist peacefully without any sort of violence concerning the nature of coexisting and living together, despite the differences with that type of diverse cultures, traditions and customs, even on the level of their creed, So to the view of Muhammad Salim Walid Muhammad in his paper Social Dimensions of Sufism in West Africa, Structures, Functions and Relationships, He stated, the value and intellectual content of Islam are eroded and more in line with dominant African customs, traditions, and values, and there is overlap of the religion and race. While some of these are not inherently incompatible with certain Islamic fundamentals, African Islam has also made peace with secularism in many African countries, leaving it to handle religious affairs and occasionally relying on it to gain political support. To the view of the late thinker and the Sudanese diplomat Dr. Mansour Khalid, Arab migrants moved inside the Sudan and lived among Nubian communities and embedded Islamic values and rituals into the culture of those communities, though they left the core communal values intact. War and Peace in the Sudan, A Tale of Two Countries, 2010, Dr. Mansour Khalid. So I suggest referring to this book mainly in this particular area, in which Dr. Mansour Khalid went on to emphasize that the new immigrants came to reconcile and embedded Islamic values and ritual into the local culture of the populace. Sudanese popular Islam was virtually paganized by Hamitic and Negro-Hamitic traditions to the extent of claiming that there was a lot in it that was decidedly non-Arabic, sometimes non-Islamic. After coming to the country, Sufis created their own unique Sudanese Sufism, which is really their creation and mark. However, this rhythm originated from the blending of African culture with the recollections or the remembrance. So the call to Islam was conveyed through remembrances signed with African drums. However, Sufi Shuyukh then adopted this approach in order to propagate Islam, and they were successful in doing so. So as we are going to see in our coming few minutes presenting this episode, Sufis has used different tools so as to attract the attention of the locals and to bring them into the fold of Islam. And among these successful tool and means, that is the drum. And the drum, by the way, has helped a lot as the means of calling for the gathering of the locals. That is because this tradition of gathering around drums is something that is natural, followed by the Africans. The better example in this area is the Gadiriya Sufi order. So the Gadiriya Sufi order, here the Sudanese Gadiriya Sufi order, built its doctrines upon local practices and tradition and won the allegiance of many of the Sudanese and became the widespread order in the Sudan. That is the view of M.W. Dali in his book Al-Majzubiyya al-Mukashfiyya, Two Tariqas in the Sudan, published by University of Khartoum Press, 1985, page 5. Sudanese Sufism used to have a unique character of accepting traditions and smoothly merging traditions and religious views that existed before the coming of the Sufis to the country. So among these means, as I have stated, the Gadiriya utilized drums as the means of and the message of calling the locals and gathering them around the Sufi circle of zikr. Moreover, Muslim Sufi masters, the Sudanese in particular, have generally accepted the authenticity of non-Muslim religious experience and encourage introspective reflection on the part of their followers, thus integrated local elements within their own doctrine. Hence, although several factors may have contributed to the atmosphere of mutual toleration in the Islamicized of the northern Sudan, the Sufi influence was especially significant in fostering a spirit of moderation and tolerance. On Islam in Sudan forum, which was held in late 1983 at Khartoum, the late former Prime Minister Sadiq al-Mahdi states, the Sufis tradition with its non-tolerance opened the way for many pre-Islamic practices to reappear in an Islamic form. So the view of the Imam Sadiq al-Mahdi goes with the above-mentioned stated views of the historian and researchers that follow the phenomenon of the Islamic spread in Sudan through Sufi tolerated doctrine. However, in this part of the episode, just I would like to have an example that show how Sufis' way of preaching came to be in difference with the preacher, I mean here the official preacher way of preaching. And our example here is represented in two influential figures that has been operated their preaching mission in Nuba Mountains. One is a scholar, that is the influential Sudanese famous scholar, the Qadi of Sharia, Muhammad al-Amin al-Qurashi, on a side with Sheikh Ismail al-Barnawi, a local from the Nuba Mountains, a Sufi that had been initiated under the Qadiriya Mukashfiya branch, initiated under the founder, my master Sheikh Abdul Baqi al-Mukashfi. So these two figures, by the way, operating, as they have stated, their mission of preaching the locals in the Nuba Mountains, represent these two views of teaching or spreading Islam in that part of the Sudan. Here is the story. The narrator stated, when the Sharia judge Qadi Muhammad al-Amin al-Qurashi, the Sharia judge who resided at that time in Kadugli, that famous Nuba Mountain city, heard the sound of drums, dancing and singing. He inquired, he asked about the source of this sound and voices. When he realized that Sheikh Ismail al-Barnawi was the source of that noise, Sheikh Ismail al-Barnawi and his followers, his murids, make that they were the source of that noise, the Qadi came out and addressing the Sufi. So Sheikh Muhammad al-Amin al-Qurashi came out from his residence while he addressing the Sufi Sheikh Ismail al-Barnawi and said, "This is how religion is practiced?" Barnawi responded, "بندرسوا وانتو ردوه بندرسوا وانتو نعموه." Behind this expression is philosophy and wisdom. The wisdom and the philosophy is there in the Sufi work of bringing the locals to Islam. So in his view, in the view of al-Barnawi, that what he and his like of the Sufis job is to bring those locals to Islam following the methods of the Sufi circle of dhikr, representing on the beating of the drum, dancing and singing. However, this stage is resemble the stage of grinding the floor in its first stage, while asking and requesting the fuqaha, the scholars, to soften that floor. And that is the process of educating these new converts. So here we are in front of two views. We are here in the presence of two views. The view of the Sufi, whose fundamental way of preaching is just to bring those locals into the fold of Islam, following the utilization of the drums in the Sufi circle of dhikr, following the dancing and the singing from a side, and that is just to bring those locals to utter and to pronounce the word of oneness. There is no God but Allah. Muhammad is the prophet of God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God. In his views, while the scholars, the fuqaha, job is to follow the way of educating and instilling on those new converts the true teachings of the Islam, the true teachings of Islam and the principles of the religion. However, instead of battling against the dominant African cultures in the country, the Sudanese Sufis were eager to harmonize and reconcile with them. They even changed them to suit their own ways, particularly in regards to spiritual mediation between a wise person and a supreme power, which is at the heart of many of Africans' beliefs. The Sufis then proceeded to agree with the owner of those beliefs in worship by chanting, singing, and dancing to the rhythm of the drums. Most significantly, many Pharaonic and Christian customs kept going, and Sudanese Islam coexisted with the local cultures because the entering religion did not battle with them or attempt to eradicate them by force, particularly in relation to the customs of marriage, birth, and death. The spiritual guardian's impact persisted. In an interview with the renowned Sudanese thinker Dr. Noor Hamad, I noted that he agreed with the aforementioned viewpoints, which claimed that the Sudanese Sufis were in harmony with the country's customs and that they peacefully based their doctrine on the legacy of the ancient Sudanese civilizations, particularly on the status of women. According to Dr. Noor, what he says, Sufism in Sudan and its efforts to honor women as human beings have a long history in the country. Spirituality is the foundation of all religions and beliefs in the invisible, regardless of their form. And Sufism is spirituality. Even though we examine our nearly 5,000-year-old Cushiite heritage and discover that women played a part in ancient temples, I am among those who think Sudanese mysticism or Sufism has unique qualities that set it apart from other forms of Sufism in Islamic countries, even though Sufism and Sufi orders with its men migrated originally from Yemen, Morocco, Hijaz, and Egypt. Dr. Noor kept on and added, it could be said that the Islamic Sufism has created a platform for peaceful dialogue among the components of the Sudanese society, in its tribes, clans, in its tongues, tradition, and even in its beliefs. Thus, the present Sudanese personality finds its roots and its original social and cultural features in the life of Tasawwuf. For what distinguishes the Sudanese of patience, integration, and solidarity, in addition to openness to the other, back to Islamic Sufism and the spiritual education of Tasawwuf. Dr. Noor added further and said, what makes Sufism unique is that it was established on a legacy of Cushiite spirituality and Christianity. When the Sufis arrived in Sudan, they built upon this ancient heritage and the cultural traits of the Sudanese peoples rather than attempting to completely alter the country's culture. While the school of jurisprudence is troubled by music, drumming and temperance and dancing, Sufis include all of those cultural elements into their rituals and remembrances. Sufis also expanded upon Kushite traditions of community service and charity, which led to the establishment of masjids, takayas, and khalawis as service social institutions. The unique taste of Sudanese Sufism was derived from all of the above and more. On the view of the Sudanese diplomat Dr. Francis Deng, Sufi Islam, like African beliefs and traditions, is more flexible in its acceptance of diversity in artistic expression and the space for artistic energy compared to formal jurisprudential Islam. Deng notes that Sufi doctrine in Sudan establishes an immense value on accepting diversity. An example of earlier Sufi order with African traditions, Nuba Mountains. In this part of the episode, I would like to use the Mukashfiya, that is famous Sudanese Sufi Qadri branch, as an example to demonstrate the early Sufis' effective non-violent approach of converting the African Sudanese to Islam in the Nuba Mountains after they made peace with their local customs. Being a pioneering tariqa, the Mukashfiya has played a significant role in the disseminating of Islamic teachings in the Nuba Mountains. This has occurred both during the lifetime of the founder, my master Sheikh Abdel Baqi al-Mukashfi, and his successors after him, who doing the best to instill in the Nuba people the true spirit of Islam. Nonetheless, Sufi brotherhoods have played a significant role in the propagation of Islam throughout the country, and in this concern I would like to point out to the effort that have been done by the locals in the Nuba Mountains following the Qadri Mukashfi branch. By the way, those local, because of their knowledge of the traditions, the customs, and the norms of living in that particular area, have succeeded in converting a lot of locals into Islam. However, those locals, shuyukh, representative of the tariqa, by the way, used to take the opportunity of different occasions to perform Islamic rituals and events like child naming, circumcision, marriage, and funerals were better settings through which the performance of dhikr following the utilization of drums and dancing were better means to gather those locals and then converting them to Islam. However, their mission is not only converting through this means, but also the local operating as healers. And here I would like to say that as if there is a replacement of the Kujuri, who strongly believe in the ancestral spirits, supporting by the ancestral spirit, and the new Faqih. So the new Faqih is not only a preacher converted Muslims from the locals through beating of the drum, but also he is the healer. That means he possesses barakah, or the spiritual grace. Following the occurrence of karamat, spiritual or extraordinary acts. So these things, by the way, came together to bring forth those locals into the fold of Islam. However, the Qadiriya there, mainly in Liri, is the ritual and organizational unit, with the great Sheikh at the pivotal point and with lesser Shuyukh as his representatives, that is known as Magaddams, or they come to be called Khulafa. The network of dervishes is very important for teaching illiterate people about Islam, the teaching of Muhammad and the content of the Quran. So all of this had been conveyed through direct contact between the Sheikh and the follower. The teaching in such encounters contains various elements of direct relevance for the daily life of the Lafufa community. For example, a central theme is what is lawful, and what that is halal, and what is forbidden, that is haram. So among the teaching that used to be spread and to be taught to the locals, that is making wine and drinking wine is haram and should not be tolerated according to the teachings of Islam. They also told, the local have been also told that women should be protected and the young daughters should be married before their virginity is endangered. In this manner, the Lufufu community gain knowledge about Islamic standards and can use this knowledge, or use this knowledge to evaluate themselves and others in relationship to the central problem of being a Muslim or not being one. That is, Al-Lafufa being a Muslim also means going to the places where Islamic teachings go on, be it a drum dancing or a Sufi circle of zikr, or wedding in the village, or even on the masjid. In this manner, the Lafufa community gain knowledge about Islamic standards and can use this knowledge to evaluate themselves and others in relationship to the central problem of being a Muslim or not being one. Thus, a Lafufa community being a Muslim also means going to the places where Islamic teachings go on, be it at drum dancing, a wedding in the village, or the masjid. From another side, what I would like to add here in regard to the conversion of the locals in the Nuba Mountain is that the Kujuri, which is part of the culture of the community, and by the way, it has been supported by what is called in the African tradition with the ancestral spirits, have been come to be replaced with the faqih following his conversion to Islam. So, as if there is a replacement in the function of a person that is, the local that is practicing and famous as Kujuri, with a new change in the culture, that is the coming of the faqih. So between the two, by the way, mainly the coming of the later, the culture of the community started to change to an extent that the faqih went on to represent the source of every goodness to them, following the way of converting them to Islam, having new culture, having new traditions with the coming of this new religion. The Fuqaha, scholars, and the Sufis. There were two types of Islamic scholars during the time of the Funj. The first were the jurists or fuqaha, singular faqih, and that is the scholars, and the Sufi or fugara, singular faqir. The first group, the jurists, taught the Quran, fiqh, jurisprudence, and Arabic grammars, in addition to Islamic teachings. Thus, they created Islamic learning centers in an illiterate society. These Islamic figures played a huge role in the Sudanese society and made the role of Islam more prominent in the Sudan. The second group were the Sufis. So Sufis were even more popular. The success that the Sufis achieved in the Sudan incited the jurists to combine teachings of jurisprudence with Sufism to enhance their status. That is the view of Professor Yusuf Fadl Hassan, the famous Sudanese historian. The combination of these two traditions was recognized by the people who resided in the North Central Sudan. This recognition was presented by the role of the faqih, a colloquial version of faqih. So the competition between the two sides, between the fuqaha and fugara, by the way, has very a strong presence into Sudanese tradition, and the success that have been made by the Sufis in attracting the masses and attracting the locals into their Sufi circle of zikrs and to their messages, by the way, had been taken the fuqaha, the scholars, to adopt Sufism as part of their teaching sessions. And from that time on, the two go on following that competition, while in more recent years, Sufism itself, I mean here the center of the Sufi, that is the Masjid, come to combine the two. We find faqih and faqir at the same time. That I mean, we come to find the Sufi scholar. So the Sufi scholar, here we have different tasks that carried out by them in different disciplines of the religion. Part of them are specialized in jurisprudence, some of them in Aqidah, that is the creed, some of them in Tasawwuf, Sufism. So from recent years, as I have come to say, that is, the image has been changed positively in favor of Sufis, mainly taken from their Sufi centers as a place of educating and spreading and disseminating the knowledge, the Islamic knowledge, following these new changes in the way of living.